General, thanks for being with us today. You've been under a lot of fire since Sunday over some comments that you made talking with my former colleague Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation. You were talking about John McCain's wartime experience and how you believe that did not qualify him to be president on its basic merits. Let's play that particular part of the interview where Bob Schieffer asked you a question about qualifications and you responded.
Right.
I have to say, Barack Obama has not had any of those experiences either, nor has he ridden in a fighter plane and gotten shot down. I mean,
well, I don't think riding in a fighter plane and getting shot down is a qualification to be president.
Now, General, you were countering a point that Bob Schieffer had made.
Exactly.
David Axelrod, the chief strategist for the Obama campaign, told us this morning, quote, "The way it came out was unfortunate. Senator Obama called it inartful." I'm wondering, do you regret the way that you said that?
Well, you know, obviously I wish we hadn't had the big brouhaha about this, because it has taken away from the message of the man I'm supporting to be president of the United States, and that's Barack Obama. I think he's got superior judgment. But John, this is an important point. I've been making it for months. It had nothing to do with the Obama campaign. They didn't know I was going to make it. I didn't know I was going to be asked about it. Bob Schieffer asked me to come on and talk about foreign affairs, and the first question out of his mouth was, Joe Lieberman says McCain is going to be a great president, and what do you think about his military experience, or something, words to that effect. Right. What I said is, I honor his service. He's one of my heroes. But having served as a fighter pilot, however great it is to show your character and courage, does not necessarily mean that you're the best qualified person in the race to be the president.
Right, but I'm just wondering, back to the original point, do you regret the way that you phrased your answer to that particular question?
Well, you know, I think if you'd seen the whole question and the whole interview in context, I think there's no issue with this. But I think it does show what can happen when an excerpt is taken. And I noticed in some of the major news channels, and I don't want to point any fingers here, but they only showed my answer as though I made that up. This is like someone says, is the sun out? You could say, yes, the sun is out, or you could say, yes, or you could say, well, the sky is blue. Right. But I just happened to answer it exactly the way it was asked. And my point is that when we're about to select a president of the United States, in a time of war and national security is going to be a big issue in this campaign, the American people should look at the real qualifications. That includes John McCain's character and courage. I've never said anything dissing that. I would never diss the service of anyone who served in the United States Armed Forces. I did it for 38 years. I was a captain in Vietnam. I commanded an infantry company, came home on a stretcher in a hospital, 4 bullet wounds in me. So, you know, I'm very sympathetic to John McCain. He's one of my heroes. But I've been at the strategic level. I led America's armed forces and NATO during the fight in Kosovo. I know what kinds of decisions get made, what the trade-offs are. I was simply pointing out John McCain, in his military service, honorable and wonderful though it was, he wasn't at that level. So his claim is a different kind of a claim. And it goes under the category or question of this, John. Do those experiences give him the judgment to have better judgment with regard to national security than, let's say, Barack Obama? And I think the record is that he hasn't shown better judgment. He's shown some worse judgment in several occasions.
I mean, it's well known, General Clark, that you rose to the absolute upper echelons of the military in this country and Supreme Allied Commander for NATO. But when it comes to that same type of qualification, you were very robustly behind John Kerry's military experience in your speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2004, where you talked about his experience of being there under mortar fire. And let's listen to the way that you summed that up.
Right. John Kerry's combination of physical courage and moral values is my definition of what we need as Americans in our commander-in-chief.
So you said it's what we need in a commander-in-chief, and I'm wondering how different was John McCain's experience from John Kerry's?
Well, a lot, because John McCain basically served honorably and well in uniform. He did everything the country could have asked. What John Kerry did is John Kerry got out of the uniform. He took a judgment I didn't agree with at the time, but he had the moral courage to stand up for himself and oppose the conflict in Vietnam.
But where was the executive experience that you talk about?
The executive experience wasn't the issue there, because John Kerry wasn't claiming that he had some special executive experience on national security against George Bush.
But he was running on his war record and using that to buttress his credentials on national security.
Sure, only in the sense of having been there and proved himself under fire. John McCain is welcome to do that. He's always done that. But in this case, it's about judgment. 8 years or 7 years into a war where we're actually having more difficulties in Afghanistan than we did 3 or 4 years ago. So you could say it's going the wrong way there, in which we're going to have to make some bold strategic moves in Iraq or risk the real erosion of the United States Armed Forces. We need a thinking president. We need someone who understands all the elements of power. And I believe we need a policy that starts with the idea that we're going to withdraw American forces from Iraq, and we're going to do more in Afghanistan, not only militarily, but diplomatically. Now, those are the ideas of Barack Obama. They're not John McCain's ideas. John has said we'll stay there for 100 years if necessary. I think if he says that, he doesn't understand. I know he's got great experience from being a fighter pilot, but he doesn't understand what the culture is there. And I want a commander-in-chief who's sensitive to that and makes the right kind of decisions for our men and women in combat and for the country.
General, the McCain campaign has got you squarely in the crosshairs. Today in a conference call, they put out Orson Swindle, who was a fellow prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton with John McCain, took specific aim at you. Here's what he said today.
We all know that General Clark, as high-ranking as he is, his record in his last command, I think, was somewhat less than stellar. The point being, General Clark ought to be ashamed of himself talking about a fellow serviceman.
Do you want to take the opportunity to respond to that?
I do. John, thank you very much. First of all, I don't know Orson. I'm sure he's an outstanding man and did a great job in uniform. He doesn't know me either. But I did in my last command as the head of the forces in NATO, lead the forces of NATO in the fight to stop ethnic cleansing in the Balkans. We did win a war. We bombed for 78 days. We broke the will of a Serb dictator. We saved 1.5 million Albanians. We did it without the loss of a single American soldier, sailor, Marine, or airman in combat. We did it with a combination of diplomacy and force. And that region remains at peace today, and Kosovo is now an independent country. Now, to me, I was placed in the crosshairs of a lot of different people in that conflict. I was in the Russian crosshairs. I was in the Serb crosshairs. I was in the crosshairs of a lot of people in the Pentagon who didn't want to get involved.
But
my point is we won.
Right, but his point is he's surprised that you're talking about a fellow service member like that.
No, his point was my record wasn't very good. So that's the first point I want to answer. As far as talking about a fellow serviceman, I've never said anything to dishonor John McCain. Look, John McCain came to my house for dinner when I was a commander in Panama. I've been to conferences with him. I've testified before him, and I like him. But I will say this, that when it comes to being the President of the United States, it's about judgment. And I've seen stronger judgment from Barack Obama, despite the fact that he doesn't have military experience, than I've seen from John McCain, despite all his worldly travels, his Senate Armed Serviceship, and what he did as an outstanding younger officer in uniform for the United States Navy. General, and to me, this is about, and I hope the American people will make the decision based on judgment.
General, we're out of time, unfortunately, but we do thank you for yours. It's good to connect with you again.
John, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be on with you.
Thanks, General.
Thank you.